Okay, so with that, I will make sure it's recording. It is. Okay. And so, yeah, our webinar is titled Gender Equity and the 15-Minute City, Exploring the Opportunities and Challenges of Planning for More Connected Communities for Women. And I'm very pleased today to be joined by two guests, Alice Kaumba, who's a Senior Manager of Land Use Planning with C40 Cities, and Sílvia Casorrán Martos, who's the Deputy to Chief Architect Office in Barcelona City Council. Welcome, ladies, and I'll give just a brief bio of both of you. So Alice currently manages C40 Cities' Land Use Planning Network, which provides support to cities to develop sustainable, resilient, and inclusive urban planning policies. In other roles, Alice has worked as an urban planner in the private sector, where she's been in charge of project management and community engagement. She's also worked with the National Land Commission, Ministry of Lands, and local governments in Kenya, and she holds a master's degree in urban development and management from Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Sílvia graduated in environmental sciences, and part of her studies took place in the Netherlands and in Mexico. Her extensive professional career focuses on sustainable mobility and the transformation of public space, working both with private and public sector agents. She's been an activist in social movement for more than 15 years, advocating for sustainable mobility. And in 2019, she was appointed the Mobility Counselor for Sant Martí district in Barcelona. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. This conversation is sort of a building off of a paper that we put together collaboratively back in May around the 15-minute city and its potential for helping cities achieve more feminist cities. So my first question to both of you, and we'll have a discussion as we go. I encourage the people that are watching to put questions in the chat, and we'll try to address them as we go. But yeah, the very first question is, do you think that the 15-minute city approach can be used in the context of diverse global cities to create a more gender equitable mobility system? And I'm going to start with you, Alice, if you wouldn't mind answering.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to be part of this discussion. Yes, I believe that the 15-minute city concept can be applied in various contexts and in various regions. Why? Because 15-minute city concept has been with us, except that the way we have baptized this is what differs. The concept focuses on mixed-use development and also connectivity within neighborhoods, and also promoting active mobility, which all this has been the domain of urban planning, as planning has been moving from exclusionary zoning to mixed-use zoning. And so this means that the concept has been applicable, except that now we are getting to emphasize it. And this means that wherever planners has been doing, they've been applying this concept in different ways with different names. But going forward, one of the things that needs to be done, and for us to ensure that there is gender sensitivity in application of this concept, we know that the built environment as it is dynamic, and the concept is very easy to apply for greenfield development because you need not to adjust anything. But for the existing cities which have existing neighborhoods, one of the things that we need to do is to undertake an assessment of available services and facilities within our neighborhoods. And through doing this, we will determine which neighborhoods are lacking behind. And this is, as per the 15-minute city concept, this is where we need to direct investment. And by doing this, in neighborhoods that's where most of our vulnerable women live, especially in the informal settlements, we will find that there is little or inadequate walkways, bike lanes, and also the public transit is not very efficient. So by identifying this, then we will go direct to apply this. And this means that our caregivers who are women will be able to do their duties effectively and also even find time to develop themselves.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and I appreciate that, the importance of that link between walking, cycling, and public transportation, especially walking and public transport, because they're very common in terms of women's transportation patterns. Sílvia, what would you add to that?
Yeah, well, I totally agree. No, with this vision, 15-minute cities, they have a lot to do with equity in cities, because of course, as you said, no, women, young people, children, elderly, handicapped people, immigrants, poor people, we all move basically on foot and on public transit for commuting reasons, but also for other purposes. And many of us simply do not have access to cars. So we know women mobility implies less distances and more destinations for both working, but also for taking care, especially, you know, for kids and elderly. So of course we need these 15-minute cities to feel more autonomous. And in the case of Barcelona, I could say that we are very lucky, because I love to say that we are already a 15-minute city, because already since the 80s, since the democracy, no, last century, our city is being built with all the facilities among all the neighborhoods and the districts. So it's very easy to cover, no, by foot, your distances to the public school, to the healthcare center, to the library, to the shopping street, and to any services. Maybe not the university, maybe not the hospital, maybe not the, of course, industrial area. No, they might be farther than 15 minutes walk. But in Barcelona City, we are such a compact city that it's really easy to move on foot. So yeah, but this is something of urban planning, of course, no? And what we need to keep is that this urban planning keeps the mixed city, no? Because this functional city, of course, I think the Mediterranean cities accomplish easily this concept, no, of mixed city, and it makes these 15-minute cities much more easy for the urban planners to be there. So I think I guess it's not fair, no, sometimes to talk about the 15-minute cities when we compare to other cities in the world, because for us it's very easy to think on this concept, no, and to feel it and to live it.
Yeah, of course. And just building off that too, Sílvia, I know that you were part of the work and part of the leading force in terms of the work around the Superblocks program, and how that has helped transform various areas of the city to allow for more walking and cycling. Can you talk a bit about that, and maybe some other programs that have helped to facilitate more sustainable transportation?
Yeah, sure. Well, in Barcelona, as in many other cities in the world, no, we are trying to transform our streets in the way that they become more livable, no, more that we put people in the center, no, of the street, because as we know, during last century, again, no, when the cars arrived, especially since the 60s, the citizens, no, that they used to be in the center of the street, no, because we had, in the 19th century, we had tramways and we had horses, but we didn't have cars. And the feeling was quite safe. No, people could really walk in the center of the street. And if we look at videos, no, from last century, this is what we appreciate. But then since the 60s, when the cars arrived, then the citizens become pedestrians, and they go directly to the façadas. No, they go away from the central part of the street. And what we are trying to do now with this project, like Superblocks, is put back, no, the person in the center of the street, and then the cars, of course, they will have access. Everyone will have access and is having access, no, to their destination, but in a very low speed. This is the key, no, to really share the public space and to feel comfortable and to feel that everyone can really live at this place, young people, elderly people, women. What our experience really shows, no, that this is working, because people feel more comfortable. We do use the public space as a social place, as our garden, no. In Barcelona, as you know, this is a very compact city. We don't have private gardens, so we need that the public space is for everyone, and especially we need to improve also the amount of green, the urban green in the city. So this is what we are trying to do with Superblocks, but also with a very ambitious program called Let's Protect the Schools, because it's clear for us that the kids they must be in the center of our urban planning. So we need to protect especially all the environments around the schools. And we are now working with the first 200 schools. In Barcelona, we've got near 600. So we hope that by 2030, all the schools in the city are really traffic calm around. And this is really working as acupuncture in the city, because the schools are spread all around the city. So in the end, what we are trying to do is to traffic calm all the city, with these actions. Well, just come to Barcelona and check the projects. But of course, we need still a lot to do. We've got still many cars, and they drive too fast in order that everyone feels safe. And of course, also with the bike lanes, we are also trying to pacify the city. But we need wider bike lanes, because of course, we the women, we move, we generally bring the kids also, or we want to cycle with our kids next to us. And this is not the Netherlands. I mean, this is not so easy as in the Netherlands to cycle with our kids. So we need to implement better infrastructure. We are in the way.
Right. And it sounds, I mean, I went to Barcelona in, it's going to age me 2005 when I was on my honeymoon, and I haven't had a chance to come back since, but I would really like to come and see what's been done there. I'm sure it's very different.
Yes, Melissa, I guess you will appreciate the change from 2005 till now. I think there are many things that changed.
And Alice, I think one of the things that has come up in the conversations I've had when discussing the 15-minute city is a lot of people very much look at it as a European approach, having sort of more recently gained a lot of traction in Paris, obviously with their implementation of it at a city level. But as you were saying in your introduction, the idea of the 15-minute city is something that we've always been doing. I wonder, could you, from the projects you're working on with African nations and African cities, sort of talk about how it is applicable in a context in Africa or other nations in the global south as well?
Thank you. The 15-minute city concept, as I mentioned, and you properly put it, has been applicable in Africa, but not with the name 15-minute city. And what African cities have been doing is mostly concentrating on the mixed use development. And currently, there's a lot of focus now on integration of non-motorized transport. And what African cities are doing now, and especially Nairobi, where I live and stay and have worked, is to prioritize pedestrianization and also development of bike lanes. Though it is a work in progress, but a lot of focus has been now changing from car-based design of streets to more inclusive street design. And especially because we've found that in the African city, the public transit was partly private, and in most cases, the public aspect of it is the person. And we also know that this 15-minute city is very important in terms of climate action. And then Nairobi just developed and approved this climate action in the month of April this year. And the focus has been, how do we transform Nairobi from being a car-based city to a city that is more public transit oriented and more pedestrian friendly, and also very inclusive. Because I'll give you an experience that we know public transit, as I mentioned, was more of private, is a private operator, and people would stand in the buses. For ladies who were standing in the buses, there were a lot of sexual harassment for women in these buses. And the government had to say, no, there's no more standing on the buses. So in designing, this is where the 15-minute city concept comes in, that if there were missing, what was missing then was the alternative transport, which is the walking and cycling way. If there was one, as a woman, I will decide, let me jump onto my bike instead of going to face those harassments within the buses. And so the cities now developing the streets with inclusivity in mind. And also even other smaller cities, we have seen a lot of tactical urbanism taking place, where streets are being temporarily closed for traffic, vehicular traffic, and being just set aside for social events, either over the weekend or during low traffic time, so that people can experience the cities more. And this is something which is very important for African cities. And even in my other role as within the National Land Commission, we were responsible for monitoring and overseeing land use planning. And one of the key priorities that we used to look at when vetting land use plans prepared by various cities around the country was how inclusive is the plan in terms of mobility. And we focused whether is this plan providing for non-motorized transport within the mixed use areas. So it's a program which is now taking shape within Africa and also within so many other cities in the global south. Yeah.
So with the idea of safety in mind, and either of you can choose who responds first. That obviously is one challenge in terms of how do we create more equitable spaces. But within some of the ideas around the 15-minute city, what other challenges do you think are presented that make it difficult to apply a 15-minute city approach? So that idea of walking or cycling close by and having those amenities within hand in relation to land use, like what sort of, at least in your work or in what you've been researching or viewing, what do you think some of the main challenges are that cities have in terms of applying these ideas?
The challenges are mostly, I'll group them into three. The first one is informality. We find that in our cities, most developments are informal, which means that very few developers do seek for approvals from the municipal government or the city government. And as a result, you find that even the developments that the city has put in terms of investment or in cycling and walking, you might find a developer going and blocking those areas. And this means these areas become inaccessible to the larger population. And also the informality aspect also not only expressed in terms of developers, but also even in formal terms of trade. So you find that the city puts a lot of investment in putting up this mobility infrastructure, but the informal traders would come and put their wares on exactly on the same spot. So you find pedestrians go back now to share the main street with vehicles. And also going to the other challenge that we have within our city is that Nairobi, as was designed before, they had a more of vehicular transport in mind, and a little was focused on the public transit aspect of it. So what we find is that we don't have dedicated bus lanes, for example, and our railway network is also not very well developed. So the 15-minute city would require that we have modal integration, and also so that we can have a smooth transfer of commuters. But with this challenge, then becomes a challenge because we don't have dedicated bus lanes or very well-developed rail transit. So that becomes quite challenging. But also, this is a challenge, but also an opportunity for us to better the situation. And the last challenge that we have is also the issues of, we are looking at women here in terms of mobility, and the woman that is the elite woman is very ready to share her ideas and to publicly speak out on what they want and they would want to see. But our cities, we find we have a lot of informal settlements where we find a lot of ladies living there with single mothers, And these ladies are not ever willing to come out and speak on what they need. And so this might be a challenge in actually knowing what works best for this the ladies in the informal neighborhoods.
Right.
Yeah,
that's an excellent point. And that idea of representation, I mean, it's in a lot of the work that we all do in terms of building that representation to provide greater context. But I think one of the challenges with engagement that we have, that I have in my work, and I'm sure you both have in your work, is reaching the people that are limited, like single mothers, especially those that are working or have young children that need to mind, is how do we reach them where they're at in order to find out what works best for them. There is another question that I will get to, I have seen in the chat, but Sílvia, I wanted to give you a chance to sort of talk about what have been some of the challenges, or what are the challenges that you perceive as well, in addition to what Alice has put forward.
Yeah, well, I think it's the challenge is that we create public spaces that are comfortable and safe. No, you mentioned also the safety concept, and I think that for this we need two main items that would be first creating community, engaging community. But first you need to create the community, no? Because sometimes the community is not there because the public space was not available for any social purpose. So when this public space is created, then this community starts being created. And then this helps in improving the concept of safety in public space, because sometimes people have the feeling that when cars are not there, the place is unsafe. Some people, yeah, might have this, or at least with the superblocks, we had this experience. No? Some people were complaining that they felt less safe without cars. But in the end, what was happening is that the social life in the street came back. And then suddenly these links among the neighbors were created, and then people would feel safer at the public space. Because in my case, for instance, no, I'm walking out at the street in the superblock and a neighbor tells me, I just saw your daughter passing by. No, if this social place is not available, this direct connection between neighbors is not there. So I think that for gender, for women, these new public spaces are very good, no, to feel safer. And of course, we need to participate in the creation of this public space, because we women have different needs than men, and still in Barcelona, mainly men participate more than women, no, in this co-creation spaces, and we really need to improve this. And the other challenge, I think it's we need to take care of everyone in public space, and this is a question of education, and it's in the end, it's a question of speed, no? In the speed at the speed that we move, no? So it's always that the one that's moving at the higher speed should take care of the rest of the people, no? So while we move by car, we need to take care of cyclists and of course pedestrians and everyone. But when we move by bike, we also need to take care of pedestrians, no? And sometimes in Barcelona, we've got these conflicts. No, it's a very comfortable city to walk and to cycle. It's starting to be also quite nice, but we are not taking care of each other enough. So we really need to go through the education as a challenge to improve the livability in the cities.
So I'm going to go to the chat here. There's a question, likely for both of you, in terms of possibly looking at things like pop-up infrastructure. I know Barcelona has some of that the last 2 years as well. But first to you, Alice, what do you think that cities can learn, or what can we learn from cities that are dealing with this informality in terms of neighborhoods and the setup of communities that can help to lead to stronger 15-minute city implementation, not just in the global south, but also in the global north? Like what can we learn from that?
One lesson that we can learn from these cities is that informality should never be ignored. We need to, as planners, as city designers, we need to think of how do we integrate informality within the urban system, because these people, they have a right to be within the city. And what the most applicable thing is to ensure that in every aspect of city development, one, we need to reach out to the most vulnerable group, and also take care of their interest, and ensure that they get the chance to also participate. Because sometimes in our public participation forums, you'll find the same category of people appearing in a meeting after another meeting. So you will have the same views and leaving out the majority who are within the formal settlements. So planners need to think of how do we integrate informal settlements and also informal trade within the city system.
Well, just building on that, Sílvia, I think you mentioned the work that you're doing with the schools and this idea of having different voices. Could you talk a little bit about maybe what kind of engagement has been involved with children in terms of the school programs in Barcelona?
Yeah, sure. Well, with the Let's Protect Schools program, we work together with schools, with families, with the districts, because in Barcelona we've got a different administration also that is more local. And we try to involve the scholar communities in order that they decide what elements do they want in the new public space that is created for them. And we are working in different European projects also with EIT, also to co-create this new furniture that is both for kids, but it's also for the neighbors, because when the schools are not there, or the families are not there, these elements will remain, of course, for the neighbors. And we really, co-create with them. We go to schools, we go inside the schools, we design the elements, and we put these elements in the public space together with them. And then we test them for a few months, and then if it's working, then we develop. And we are now developing one furniture that is linked to schools, that is both for sitting but also for giving lessons or for theater and so on. And of course, we try to use natural elements, as wood or these kind of things. They really feel attached, not to the public space. I mean, when people participate, when we co-create in the design of public space, we feel much more attached, and we like to take care of this new public space. This is about schools. And of course, with super blocks, we try to involve all the handicap. For instance, we work very closely to the blind people because we want them. In general, we know that when there's a unique platform, they don't feel safe because they don't know exactly where the cars might drive or the bikes. So they really want to know how it's working. So we create small examples of how it's working, and we decide together with them what kind of pavement do they need to be sure of whether they are at a safe place. I mean, everything should be a safe place, but of course, where cars are riding, it is not that easy. So we really need try to involve all these different targets in order. The objective is to make make them feel linked, or that they belong to this new public space.
Yeah, that's often we're talking about people with disabilities, how people with visual impairments interact with the space, it becomes a challenge as well. But like everything, like Alice, you've spoken about bringing the women, especially from the informal communities, into the conversation, or bringing the children in, or bringing people with disabilities in. That it's so important to have those voices, and I think is part of how bringing more of these sort of like connected or 15-minute city approaches into a successful space for implementation is really about engagement and communication with the people that are going to benefit most from these improved environments.
In the end, what we need to create is this concept of caring cities, cities where everyone feel comfortable and safe. And for this purpose, it's very important to include them, because we are used. I don't know about your cities, but when I consider Spanish cities or Catalan cities, last century, they were planned by men that were moving from A to B by car. that they were not taking care of their kids, of the elderly. So the easy thing to plan was the highways, direct ways for the cars. They didn't think about how people could move to bring the kids to school or to go to the health center, or how people on a wheelchair could move or could cross this bridge that had steps. I think that the new thing of this century, but this is quite recent. I mean, it's that we are women, urban planners, that we are now in power and taking decisions about how the city should be from our perspective. And our perspective, of course, brings our experience. So I think now it's much easier to plan the cities, in this concept of caring cities, but it's something really, really recent. I don't know about you. What do you think, Alice?
Yeah, the issues of gender sensitive urban planning is a very recent idea, and it has taken the world with a lot of storm. And together with Nairobi is the headquarters of UN Habitat, and the UN Habitat has produced a very good guide on her city, and this has seen so many girls within Nairobi start thinking of how do I get into the built environment profession. Of course, this tool has been used by the professional bodies, like the planning associations, the architectural association, to use it to mobilize girls that there's a profession here that you also need to get involved in. Don't just think of this a profession for men. You need also to participate and contribute in the design of cities. And we have seen a lot of advocacy by women. And in Kenya, we have an organization called Women in Real Estate. And they really, this organization is taking the first steps of going around high schools, telling girls that you can also be involved in the built environment profession. And this is very key. And now we have a lot of lady planners, lady architects, and also lady real estate development managers, not only in the profession, but also leading these associations. So it's a very good starting point for us, and also to just get the voice of women in the design of cities, and also to put them into practice. So it's very important.
I'm going to come back to a question I see here in the chat, and something that you mentioned earlier, Alice, and actually both you and Sílvia have mentioned the idea of social safety, or the risk of sexual harassment. And so, when we're talking about creating more walkable communities, more connected communities, how can we help address those ideas of social safety or the perceived or actual risk of sexual harassment in spaces to further support women not participating, but feeling comfortable in the public space as we develop 15-minute cities? So Alice, I'll start with you in terms of the integration of walking and public transportation. What can we do as policymakers, urban planners, land use and zoning to help assist in creating that safe environment?
I think the first thing that we have to do as professionals within this sector is that we have to think of how safe street design. And this means that in our design, we need to avoid a lot of cul-de-sacs, which always are areas for insecurity, especially towards the evening or dark corners where people can easily get mugged. And for women, it is even more critical that we ensure that after creating this safe design proposals within our plans and urban design frameworks, the next thing is that we really need to ensure that these places are, we have a lot of lighting within these areas, because women don't feel safe in a dark place. And even if I had to walk from point A to B and I know it is dark, I'll rather they will tend to take a longer route, or get onto into a vehicle, which is not also very sustainable sometimes. Also, in terms of security of women, we find that a woman will be walking around with her children or daughters or sons, and children sometimes get to be scared or get to run away, run along the streets. And if our streets are, we don't have barriers separating the vehicular route from the pedestrian walk, then we find a lot of children getting into accidents. So the first thing we need to do as planners is, how do we integrate safety designs within our plans and implementing this? Then the next step is to lighten up these streets. And then the most critical is to ensure that we get the views of the users of these areas. Because if I talk to a man, he will give me a different experience. I talk to a girl, he will give me a different experience. I talk to a mother, he will even add another layer of about her children and about other duties that she's taking care of. Yeah.
And Sylvia, I know that addressing social safety and the risk, the feelings of insecurity around sexual harassment was something that was considered in the programs you've been working on as well. Could you talk a little bit about how Barcelona's approach to increasing the feelings of safety and helping to reduce cases of sexual harassment?
Yeah, we wrote a manual on gender urbanism, and we also wanted to go farther into how to integrate this gender urbanism concept into our plans and projects. And we developed this guide for our internal, for our technicians, for our architects and urban planners. And of course, what we try to do is to implement all these measures, of course, lightning, but also not hiding places, or creating more open spaces, without elements that can really block you from the vision from the streets. And what we really love to do, and we are doing this with all the new projects, is how do you call it, the walking. It's like walking tours, especially with women, like Jane Jacobs used to do in the States. And we love that because we really can appreciate, we really discover new elements that we, as urban planners, we didn't recognize because we don't know the streets so as much as the neighbors. So we really go to this, and we've got a project called Vila Veinas. It's called this means city neighbor, or city neighbor, something like this. And the first thing we do is this recognition about public space and what elements do we need, both to feel more safe, but also to feel more comfortable, like benches, the simple thing of benches. The location of benches makes some accessible walking routes or not, because other people, they really need benches to sit every 100 meters, 200 meters. So depending on where the benches are located, then the routes are created. And this is also creating also problems, sometimes, because some neighbors don't want benches, because maybe at night they might be used by young people. So it's always public space is a great place for the conflict, for the eternal conflict. And then the municipality, what we need to provide is all the elements, to provide comfortable and safe space, but also civic place where everyone respect the right to sleep, for instance, but also the right to enjoy the public space from the kids or from the young people, because I really think that cities are not good we always forget the young people, and this is something that we need to work with.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And my children are now teenagers, and what I find interesting when it comes to how we design cities is we're now getting really good at creating fun places for small children, or up until 12, 13 years old, or when we're adults, spaces that we enjoy. But the teen years kind of get forgotten about. And you brought up that excellent program, Her City, Alice, where I know that part of that is, bringing teenage girls at least into the conversation to provide their insights also. I want to shift, we're getting a little bit closer to the end of the webinar, but I wanted to just shift slightly, because one of the things that came up when I was doing the research around the correlation between the feminist city and the 15-minute city approach is the risk of gentrification. We know that this is something that happens in a lot of cities when we start putting investments in public space. One of the terms that came up in my research was the idea of gentrification, because women want to be closer to the things that they need to perform these care trips more comfortably while they're also working. But what do you think are some things that cities can do, not to complete, like I'm not saying we're going to solve gentrification today, that's a much bigger webinar for another day, but maybe some things that, at least in the cities that you're working with, that can be done to help at least mitigate some of the challenges that are presented with gentrification and the outcomes of some of the city investments. And whoever wants to go first can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Gentrification is a real challenge, and we know that once an investment is put in a place, the market forces will always result into increase in land value, and sometimes the landowners would want to increase the values of their housing, or also sell them off to gain more profit. And to ensure that we minimize this, what the cities that we are working with, what cities are doing is that cities are putting in place policies that ensure that existing households are not displaced by investment. So, for example, a city will put in the planning document a policy, like in this area, for example, in affordable housing areas, that the developers are not supposed to increase rent for a given period of time, maybe 5 years or 6 years, depending on the context. So you find that the earlier households which were there will still continue to live there. And also what happens within global South cities with the slum upgrading programs, there's always affirmative action by the government that they give priority to the existing households. So they will be relocated to a decanting site after the development of the original site. The earlier families are given first priority. They will occupy these houses. And also, in addition to that, they are the right to sell is taken away from them. So they cannot sell the houses, but always people will find a way of going behind the rules, and they would sublet the house. So the only thing they can do is to sublet, which means they will still gain some income from that, and maybe live, which will, if is a better program, they would use that to maybe access another place to live. But most cities, what cities are doing is what I said earlier, is that putting in policies to prevent landlords from increasing rent, which would mean that original families would still continue to stay where they used to stay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and that idea of like an actual policy as opposed to a nice idea is great, because oftentimes with the impact of gentrification is on our most vulnerable, and when it comes to women, at least in a North American context, what I know of is often women of color, single mothers, or widows who can't afford a drastic increase in price or to be pushed out. So I mean, I think that's at least a good step. And obviously you've noted that there's challenges within that, but makes me very excited to hear that that approach is being taken. Sílvia, what about you? What do you think in terms of,
Well, the discussion between gentrification, no, and the improvement of public space. It has been always there because, of course, when we improve public space, then the prices or the housing and the ground floors especially, they improve also, no, the conditions, the livability conditions. In Barcelona, what we try to do is always treat the public space equally in all the city. Like, no, we want all the citizens that they can enjoy a high quality public space. It doesn't depend on the neighborhood, because we consider that we cannot go inside each apartment, but our main competence is the public space as the city council. So what we need to do is to improve this public space for everyone, of course. But we are in a few years ago, we had some neighbors in a square that had to be renovated, that they didn't want it because they were afraid about the rising of the housing. But what we are trying to do is, like Alice says, not to prevent the situation with other tools. And then these tools are, for instance, in the super blocks now in the new green corridors in a Champla grid. What we did is a uses plan. I don't know how you say it in English, but we tried to prevent that the ground floor uses will keep the same before and after the improvement of the public space, because we also don't want all the streets in Barcelona to become fancy restaurants and bars. No, we want also the local retailers to stay there, because of course we want this 15-minute city. So we want that the people can go to the bakery and can go to the pharmacy, as they did before the improvement of the public space. So yeah, and we've got other tools like any new housing building in Barcelona, 30% of that will be for social price. So it's like 30% of the new housing will be blocked in terms of price. And also we are really trying to push for a national housing law to limit all the renting prices for the apartments. We did this from the Catalan government, but then the Spanish government said it's not their competence, so they've got this kind of discussions. But it's really important that we can limit the prices of the housing, because else we'll have a really nice city, but then our citizens will leave because they cannot afford living there. And of course, in cities like Barcelona, with all this tourism, this is also really important, because some landlords, they really want to keep buildings just for tourists, because they get more money for this. So we are also trying to be quite pushing with this, and we try to push everyone to be really legal. And of course, as Alice says, probably some people do illegal things, but for us it's a very important priority from our government, from our city. So yeah, gentrification is a very important issue, and we're really trying to cope with it, but with different tools that not improving public space.
Right. Excellent. Well, I guess I want to give the opportunity. I'm not seeing any other questions. If anyone has a question, please pop it in the chat for sure. But I wanted to give you both an opportunity to maybe just provide some sort of final thoughts on sort of what you think cities and professionals working in mobility and in urban planning need to consider if they're thinking of implementing the 15-minute city approach, be it at a community level or a citywide level. Some important, beyond, I mean, we've talked about a lot, but beyond what maybe we've already talked about, or maybe reinforcing what we talked about, what are some of the key things people need to consider when thinking about applying a 15-minute city approach? I'll begin with you, Sílvia.
I go then?
Yeah.
Well, for me, what is crucial is that the urban law takes these mobility issues in consideration, and any new development must be connected on foot, by bike, by public transit to the rest of the city. So because here in the last century also, and also the century in the beginning, there were created many urban areas, but disconnected from the rest of the urban sprawl. And the only way to reach these new urban developments was by car. I mean, we really need to forget about this model, because it's this is not creating city, this is not creating 15-minute cities, of course, and this is not creating a city for everyone, no, a caring city, because we need these new urban developments to be connected, because we want our teenagers, no, to be autonomous, to move to the cities, to the cinema, to the school. So it's always, we need to provide these connections for pedestrians, for bikes, and for public transit, and then also the cars. But first, we need to make sure that this is happening. And in here, we've got a law, a mobility law in Catalonia since 2003, but sometimes it's not being totally watched, no, how it's being implemented. And for me, this is very crucial, no, that the urban law has this as a main element.
Yeah. I'll just as you've mentioned, I think it's very important that we focus on polycentric urban development, and so that we don't have a city with a very prime center where everybody has to rush to get their basic needs, to get to hospital, to get everything. So shifting to polycentric urban development will be a key aspect for implementing the 15-minute city. And also in the context of Global South, this concept would need to be integrated within the existing programs within the cities. For example, in affordable housing programs, where we don't only just build the units, but also look at this the space as a system, where we have to provide for public open spaces, the green areas, and also the walking and cycling paths within these neighborhoods. And also even in the much known slum upgrading programs, we need to think of integrating this concept within the slum upgrading program. And of course, very important is also to ensure that there is digital connectivity, because 15-minute city is not only about the physical, because we are limiting the amount of travel. So we need also to ensure that people are digitally connected. I can speak to a person with another part of the city without necessarily traveling to visit them. And also, even as we switch to the online working mode, the office now is turning to be home. So it is good that with urban planners and also city designers, and of course city governments, thinks of improving digital connectivity within neighborhoods. Yeah.
And I see there's a question here in relation to the idea of less dense cities. And I think, Alice, your comments around this polycentric design and the idea that we can't just build these satellites of this is where people live, this is where you shop, this is where you work. I think, and you can both correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of thinking would also be beneficial to more sprawling nations. So the question is specifically thinking about UK and US cities, but I was just in Norway, for example, and a similar question came up because they are so spread out throughout the country. Would you say that this sort of like better integrated approach to design, so obviously not always building let's say office towers in and around residential communities, but thinking more about that mixed use land use would be a solution to even sprawled areas in terms of applying 15-minute cities?
Yes, the polycentric urban development will mean that even in these areas which are more of designed as an urban sprawl city, it's good to introduce rezoning within these areas, so that we can allow mixed-use development within the low-density residential areas. Mostly these areas are single-family dwelling areas. So if you could, by introducing zoning reforms, we could be able to bring in more housing typologies, different housing sizes, and also not only the housing, we could also bring compatible commercial uses within these areas. And also create, because these areas has some of the best infrastructure in these areas. So we can also to take advantage of this investment, bring in other uses, maybe light industrial that is not polluting to these areas, so that we prevent a lot of long distance travel or commuting to the city center. So rezoning is one of the things that need to be done there, and also encourage a lot of infill development, of course, with taking care of the general livability of the place. If not well taken care of, we could have a lot of high skyscrapers with no public space left, or with little or no walking or cycling places. But we have to look at it in a holistic manner. Yeah.
Anything to add, Sílvia?
Really interesting, Alice. Thank you.
All right, I see we're at time here, so I have one last question for both of you, which may or may not be an easy one, but through the work you're doing, through your experiences, would you think that the 15-minute city can be a feminist city? And I'll start with you, Sílvia.
You said a permanent city?
A feminist city. 15-minute city.
Feminine. Totally. No, for me, this is really crucial. I mean, no, the way we move means that we need these 15-minute cities as women to feel really free and autonomous in our daily commuting needs. Yes, absolutely. It's not difficult. It's easy answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. 15-minute city can be a feminist city. And we know when we build a city for a woman, we build a city for everyone, including our children and our male counterparts. So it's a very good 15-minute city is a feminist city, and it's a city for all the city residents.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. I really enjoyed listening to both of your insights. I've learned something I'm sure that our attendees have. If you have more questions for those that have joined us today and you weren't able to get them addressed, do reach out. You can contact us through social media, or you can email either Women Mobilize Women or myself, info@mobycon.com, and we'll be happy to pass your questions along to our speakers today. Once again, I just want to thank my co-collaborators from TUMI and Women Mobilize Women and C40 Cities for helping to make this webinar happen. Obviously, stay tuned for future sessions, and yeah, other than that, have a good rest of your day wherever you may be. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.